Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to. Lots to talk about. 2-year anniversary of the bipartisan infrastructure law. The president spent a little time doing some tweeting today, or at least his staff did, talking about all of the Republicans who voted against the bipartisan infrastructure law, but yet took credit for it. And you got to love that. I was against this little piece of it over here, but I'm going to take credit for everything else, but didn't vote for it. That always cracked me up. Always made me laugh that you're going to be against it, but you're for it. So you were for it before you were against it, or against it and for it. Confusing. Why you would then go out to the public and go, look at all the wonderful stuff I'm bringing back to my state. Look at the bridges and the roads and the whole things, all that stuff. But I didn't vote for it. And the interesting thing today, because our quote of the day comes from Texas Republican Representative Chip Roy, who I've always said is crazy. I have not been a huge Chip Roy fan over the years, but Chip evidently has been watching the show. And Chip, I think, kind of understands the reality of the world that we're in. So here's what Chip had to say. Just to get a thought here. Here's Chip.
I want my Republican colleagues to give me one thing, that I can go campaign on and say we did. One. Anybody sitting in the complex, if you want to come down to the floor and come explain to me one material, meaningful, significant thing the Republican majority has done, one thing.
if we're talking about what, geez, I just did the dumbest thing I've done in probably all the years I've been doing this. We've been having major tech issues for the last couple of weeks, and I just had really the worst moment of probably my existence. Because the reality is the Biden folks have been doing a great job. Today they tweeted out, oh man, have you ever had one of those days? Oh, I can't get over it. It is quite. Our tech issues are just driving me insane. But the White House put out a series of tweets today that there are more congressional Republicans taking credit for Biden's bipartisan infrastructure law because, hey, this is the second anniversary of the bipartisan infrastructure law. And they went through and they talked about a number of the Republicans who did not vote for it. And this is one of those things where you go, at what point do you say, hey, you didn't vote for it. You don't get to take credit for it. It doesn't work that way. But you got Tommy Tuberville, you got Tom Cotton, you got Boozman, you got a bunch of Republicans out there saying, hey, yeah, we were against it, but we were for it. Or we got for it, against it, all of that. But the quote of the day, Chip Roy, quote of the day. And I love Chip Roy, crazy right-wing zealot. But he had an interesting statement. And this comes back to something I think is really important. Chip had this to say.
One thing. I want my Republican colleagues to give me one thing, one, that I can go campaign on and say we did. One. Anybody sitting in the complex, if you want to come down to the floor and come explain to me one material, meaningful, significant thing the Republican majority has done, one thing. I want my Republican colleagues to give me
just one thing. That's all they want. And he's right. Just one thing. But I want to hear your thoughts. We will fix our tech issues after the break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So at the end of this, I come back to Republicans have almost nothing to run on in 2024. And as I said, the Biden folks, lot to run on, a lot to get through. And I think that is a good thing. Let's go to Steve in Chicago on line one. Steve, how are you today?
Yes, I'm fine. And I wanted to expand upon what you were talking about. I mean, it's absolutely true. Republicans had nothing to run on because they are the party of no. There's no vision. Usually a party needs some sort of a platform and a vision for how you move the country forward in terms of holding power. But no, they've just become the party of whatever the Democrats are for, we are against. Whatever progressive politics is for, we are against. Okay, I mean, I suppose that there are people who might support a political ideology that is against something, but you've also got to substitute something that you're for, because things don't run themselves. And then this is an old formula with regard to taking credit for the things that you oppose. I mean, we already have seen evidence of this. I mean, so the number of Republicans who are going to take credit for the infrastructure bill that they opposed in the upcoming 24 election cycle is going to be remarkable. So they'll be like, your state got X number of hundreds of millions of dollars and this and this and this, and billions. And, we've done these projects, and it's lowered unemployment, it's created jobs, it's created contracts, all of this sort of thing. We've done that for you. No, actually, you're part of the party that voted against it, actually wanted to reduce the infrastructure bill and was successful in doing so because we needed a much larger infrastructure bill to address the deficits with regard to what we haven't been spending on our infrastructure in decades. So it's just the irony of ironies. And then in terms of resolving temporarily at least the budget crisis, so that we don't go into the Thanksgiving holiday with places like the TSA and not being fully funded, and therefore people waiting in line for 4 hours to get on a flight. Yeah, they knew that they needed to have some sort of a short-term vote, some sort of a short-term plan. And the thing of it is that it's only through Democratic votes that was able to pass. That meant that select Republicans, were free to then vote against it once they knew that it would pass. So then you can go back home and say, well, you know what? I stood my ground against, the swamp and the deep state and everything else, and, I was one of the people who voted against it, knowing full well that if it came down to your vote, you would have voted for it, as opposed to voting against it. But you were free, to vote against it because you knew it was going to pass. I mean, people, they really don't understand. They don't do this for a living, so they just think that, okay, this was the vote and this is how people voted. No, there's a whole lot of political calculus that goes into this.
No, you're spot on right. And this is how we don't get the things that we need addressed. This kind of gamesmanship, this kind of political calculus, as you say. It's the reason that working people never get what we need out of our Congress.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you pointed out yesterday, we end up covering, ridiculous things like challenging each other to a fight and that kind of nonsense. I mean, that was an important, hearing in which a labor representative needed to be talking about that issue in front of senators. And instead, what did we take from that? If you ask any American, it wasn't about what that meeting was supposed to be about. No, it ended up being about some ridiculous, 19th century honor code sort of nonsense. Hey, you insulted me, let's step outside crap, like we're in a bar or something. And that's the thing, is that I'm afraid that unlike in 2020, the thing about COVID was it did manage to crystallize things for people in this country. And a lot of people got interested in things like public policy and politics that hadn't been otherwise interested. And because, quite frankly, we all know that, look, we were stuck at home. There were no concerts, there were no ball games, there were no new movies, everything was shut down, and politics was sort of the name of the game. And people got involved and got interested in it and so forth. But then after COVID, I predicted, I said, young people's interest will fall away. Most of the rest of us will go back to wondering what our favorite sports team is doing, what the Marvel Cinematic Universe is doing, what all this other nonsense that goes on that preoccupies our time. The kind of thing that Noam Chomsky talks about, in terms of manufacturing consent. One of the ways that you get people to sort of stop paying attention to what goes on in the world is to distract them with a lot of other nonsense and convince them that what Kim Kardashian is doing is really important.
Bread and circus.
What your congressman is doing. Yeah, exactly. The Romans knew it. We don't want to suspend the games. Oh, wait, it's time to, we move beyond this. It's barbaric. No, if you don't let people have the games, they might start paying attention to what's going on in the society in which we live. So, yeah, the Romans knew that 2,000 years ago, and things have not changed. The only thing that's changed is perhaps we're not actually killing each other in terms of mixed martial arts tournaments, but, it's pretty damn close. But it just goes to show you that human nature doesn't change all that much.
No, you're spot on right. Appreciate it, Steve. Thanks so much. Let's go to Alice on line 2. Alice, what's on your mind? How you doing?
semi-coherent.
To start.
What I wanted to, yeah, a little bit of an improvement. What I wanted to say was this. I think that the Republicans, some of them are setting up going, wait a minute, we got bad news in Ohio, we got bad news in this state, that state. Some of our constituents are calling us, complaining because we, are doing whatever or whatnot. Then we had the Lauren Boebert nonsense. MGT's acting like a twit. So I don't think it's so much a worried about what they've done, but a more of a, oh, gee, what are we going to run on? Because apparently people are upset about things.
Yeah, because people need things done. I mean, that's the reality. People need lives to get better, and our elected leaders haven't done it. Appreciate the thoughts, Alice. Thanks. Which brings me to this, this story that I came across. I think it was the Washington Post that had this story on ballot initiatives in a red state like Nebraska, and they point out that look, a lot of progressive ideas are very popular, and the one thing that they were talking about in this small town of Crete, Nebraska, where citizens are organizing to push a ballot initiative to get paid sick days. And they're talking about this person who was on their time off, going around collecting signatures for what is viewed as a very liberal, progressive policy. And they want to put this on the ballot to give people the opportunity to get at least 5 paid sick days a year if you work in Nebraska. And look, they've tried this a couple of times since 2016, failed in the Nebraska legislature. They've tried it in Congress. It's I think it's passed the House, dead on arrival in the Senate. And understand, it's popular. Working people, especially working families, understand the need to have some paid sick time. But what we've got is, exactly what Steve and Alice are talking about. We've got an ideologically divided Congress that are polarized to no end. I'm in my camp. I've got my hat. You got yours, and we can't talk to each. We can't solve simple problems, let alone big ones. And look, it isn't just in D.C. The state legislatures are just as bad because they're so badly gerrymandered that you don't even have balance. So one party rams through its agenda, and the other, and in a red state like Nebraska, the agenda is not worker friendly. In a red state like Nebraska, paid sick days, minimum wage increases, this kind of stuff, not making it through the legislature. You have to go through the ballot initiative if you're fortunate enough to be in one of the couple of dozen states that allow citizen-sponsored referendums. My state does not. And look, citizen-led referendums have been very popular to raise minimum wage, to legalize marijuana, expand Medicaid, all kinds of stuff. The abortion thing, Ohio, just a perfect example. And look, they've even done it, red and purple states like Kansas and Kentucky and Montana, where you go, whoa, because the legislature won't do it. And this is where, again, our political system seems to be broken. Now you go, well, this is direct democracy. This is democracy in action. Yeah, but this isn't how this isn't how our system was supposed to work. We were supposed to have representatives of the people go do what the mass of the people want. And look, overwhelmingly, these pro-worker policies, this pro-worker agenda is popular. It is something that needs to be moved and accomplished. But they make it so hard, and on purpose, especially if you don't have huge bankrolls. Now understand, I&R may be fun, initiative and referendums may be fun for voters. It's not perfect, because sadly, big money usually wins. There are some things that I would have liked to have seen not taken. And it comes back to where we're in this weird world where our representatives aren't listening to the people anymore because they're not concerned about being voted out. They're not concerned about what we, the people, think anymore, it seems. Because red hat, blue hat, purple hat, doesn't matter. The people I talk to and I go, hey, are you happy about what's coming out of the Republican-led Congress right now? Are you happy with what they're doing? And to a person, the answer is no. Because individuals' needs, community needs, society's needs are not being met. Now, there are some who are like, well, government shouldn't do anything. And, I go back to my visit to the Teddy Roosevelt inaugural site, where, what do you think we should do? On that board, we need more states' rights. What does that look like? If we go to this utopian world of each state being able to do what it wants, we don't have a representative democracy in most states. And that's the weird, bizarre thing. So I'm not sure where we're heading in this day, but I'll tell you what's concerning to me is our elected officials, our representatives aren't listening. And there's part of me that goes, we vote for people, and they dig in, because it's then all about getting reelected. It's not about doing things anymore. And I've often said, I have Joe Walsh on the program quite often, and Joe and I disagree on policy wholeheartedly, but we both agree that we could probably sit down and iron something out. That for the good of the country, for the good of our constituents, for the good of working people, there's always a pathway forward. But that isn't what our Congress is doing. And the sad reality is you've got a Republican Congress that's done nothing. And Chip Roy is right. I don't often agree with Chip Roy. He's right. They have nothing to run on. They haven't even passed messaging bills. I mean, because you do this performatively. You go out and you pass a bill, hey, we're going to think of anything. We're going to execute, people within, 3 months of a crime or whatever. And you get people all riled up. Yeah, we're going to do that. Knowing that the Senate's never going to allow that to happen. The president's going to veto it. They aren't even doing the messaging bills that you would think they would. Hey, we're going to bust every labor union. Yeah, corporate America's thrilled. Or, we're going to make abortion illegal for everybody, from the moment of conception or from the moment of thinking about conception. And the basic, yay, we're going to vote for you. They aren't even doing those things, which I got to tell you is really bizarre. Because that's what they're supposed to be running on, their record. And what is their record? Their record's chaos. Their record's crazy. Their record is not just doing nothing, but causing chaos and destruction while doing nothing. We almost had a shutdown for no reason. I want to hear your thoughts, though. Is this the future? Will we, the voters, wake up and start throwing some of these bums to the curb? Or will some of them retire off and maybe I'm just being too hopeful? But I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Right back after this. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2014. That was the day 4 workers were killed and a 5th injured during a chemical leak at a DuPont insecticide plant near Houston, Texas. The plant used methyl mercaptan in its production of insecticides. 24,000 pounds of the deadly chemical were released through 2 valves in a poorly ventilated building on site. The U.S. Chemical Safety Board found numerous flawed safety procedures, design problems, and inadequate planning. Days earlier, liquid methyl mercaptan had solidified in piping, causing a blockage. Workers attempted to clear it by spraying the pipes with hot water. They didn't realize they had cleared the blockage, which then created a high-pressure buildup of the chemical in other piping. When 2 workers went to drain those pipes in a routine procedure, they were overcome by toxic vapors. Another 2 workers answering the subsequent distress call were also killed. DuPont blamed the workers for the release of the toxic gas, but the CSB found a number of violations. The building where the release occurred had an inadequate toxic gas detection system. Ventilation fans were not working, and the workers were not required to wear additional breathing protection for tasks they performed there. Line clearing procedures were faulty, routinely exposing workers to toxic fumes. The board also found that DuPont worked to conceal from environmental regulators as many as 4 releases of methyl mercaptan 2 days before workers were killed. The CSB asserted that design flaws prompted months of clogs before the deadly incident. More generally, they noted that the design of the building that housed the pesticide unit inherently increased the threat of exposure to workers and the public. DuPont opted to close the plant in 2016 rather than meet recommendations of federal regulators. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
For people who live in trailer parks, can anything be scarier than the sound of a roaring tornado? Yes, most frightening is seeing slick real estate gentrifiers prowling around. For some 20 million low-income Americans, being able to park a mobile home in a trailer park is their only affordable refuge from homelessness. But while they own their mobile homes, a landlord owns the land they're parked on. So here come high-finance hucksters backed by Wall Street rapaciously buying out local landlords, then casting out the powerless trailer owners so developers can build luxury condos for the rich on that land. It's an especially contemptible case of corporate greed stomping on human need. Indeed, these are among America's most vulnerable people being stripped of their homes. But what can they do? Ask the residents of Riverside Terrace Trailer Park, located near downtown San Antonio. Many had previously been evicted from a nearby mobile home facility that was converted into a high-dollar apartment complex owned by an out-of-state hedge fund. So they panicked when word spread that Riverside Terrace had been put up for sale by local owner Travis Cummings. But then came a New Hampshire-based advocacy group named ROC, Resident-Owned Communities. It contacted Cummings and Riverside's low-income residents about forming a co-op. Then, the group provided expertise and arranged financing so Riverside's tenants could create, control, and collectively manage a co-op that is now the official owner of the 46-unit park. Valerie Valenzuela, who works evening shifts at a Home Depot and was elected to the new co-op's board, proudly notes that the residents, who mostly have incomes under $30,000 a year, are now not just tenants, but homeowners. This is Jim Hightower saying, today, some 1,000 mobile home communities are resident-owned. For information, go to rocusa.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I saw an interesting quote today that got me thinking, because the Screen Actors Guild and the writers and all those folks were on strike for all that time, fighting for better wages, hours, conditions. I think it was like 146 days they were on strike, something like that. And one of the CEOs, is David Zaslav, Warner Brothers Discovery CEO, was quoted saying that the people with the strikers, they were right about almost everything. So what if we overpay? I never regret overpaying for great talent or a great asset. I'm going, well, where were you at the beginning of this? Where were you going? No, don't strike here. We're going to give you what you need to allay some of your fears of future replacement. Where were you then? Well, I don't know. That's why I've asked my good friend Elliot Bales to come talk with us. Elliot is an actor, and he's also a member of the Screen Actors Guild, SAG-AFTRA, and Actors Equity. He is a member of the SAG-AFTRA Washington Mid-Atlantic Local Board, also a retired Army colonel. Elliot, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, great to be with you again. Thanks for the chance.
So what do you make of this comment?
Well, first of all, let me always say, as I say anytime I get on air and start talking, I'm speaking for myself. It's my own point of view. I don't represent the union or any faction thereof or any political party from either side. So this
you got the disclaimer out there.
Got the disclaimer out there. Now I can say whatever I want. first of all, I think what every one of us knows who's worked labor negotiations from either side of the table knows that the first message that has to come out is the prelude to the next contract negotiation. So this is the first shot by a CEO saying, yeah, these guys are great, but we gave them too much. So next time we're going to ask for it to come back. So I know it is what it is. That's rhetoric. And I think the more we separate rhetoric from the reality, I think the real part of that statement is, yes, these people were exactly right about where the industry is going and what we're trying to do. The quote smacked of me as an old soldier, like the famous World War I story where the general comes up to the trenches for the first time in his pristine uniform and the doughboys are down there all muddy. And he looks across the field in his binoculars across no man's land. And he says, you know what? I'd give 10,000 men to take that hill. And the soldiers hear this and they look up and go, he's a generous bastard, ain't he? And that's what this sounds like. Well, I'd give, I'll overpay for anything until shareholders. I think it's better for the shareholders to comment on that than for us. But I think it just says, hey, the model's there. We have the money. We should be paying for this because this is our bread and butter.
I took that differently. I'm going, you're not overpaying anyone. You're paying for a product. You're paying for labor. You're paying for people's blood, sweat, and tears. And I would argue you're not even overpaying. So for me, that's where I took the slap in the face.
Well, the overpayment piece is setting up the next negotiation.
Right.
So I heard that as a negotiator. I heard that as a person who's been on both sides of the table. I heard, okay, you're saying we overpaid you, so we're going to try and cut it down the next time. And our message is, no, we're going to ask for a lot more because we didn't get everything we wanted. So yeah, I will always take it as an insult to being told that me making enough money to feed my family is overpayment. That me being able to pay rent is overpayment or pay my mortgage. Me being able to not even be able to buy a Ford, as you and I were talking over, is in making payment. That's one of the things I found when I was talking with the guys. We did a couple of events, went out to a couple of the struck UAW facilities, and they were saying, back in the day when we started, you could, the whole thing was Henry Ford, like him or don't, was every worker ought to be able to afford a Ford. And now the guys are saying, I can't even afford the down payment on any vehicle that we make. And that on the wages that we're being paid.
Right.
And so, yeah, you're not overpaying us if that's all we're doing is coming back up to where inflation has kept us 3 years in arrears.
Now let's talk.
Yes, I agree with the response, but I know where it comes from.
Yeah, I mean, look, you were right. I mean, and you go, wow, that was nice of him to say you were right about everything. But did you have to go through all of the pain and the suffering and the struggle to get to an agreement that isn't horrible? Because I've heard some good things and I've heard some bad things. So give me your assessment of what was negotiated ultimately, what the tentative agreement brought you.
There were 5 things that we set out to begin with to have this negotiation. The first was make up for what has happened to us over, frankly, 3 negotiating cycles where they won, and we didn't play hardball, as well as the rate of inflation dramatically increased. So we needed to catch up to where we got pay parity, where we're at least going to be making the same in 3 years that we're making yesterday. We needed to fix our health plan. They had lagged on making contributions. We had not fought enough for that, so we needed to go after a greater contribution health plan. We needed to fix residuals, and I talked the last time a little bit. That's how our compensation structure is. It's expensive to make a TV show or a movie up front, so we get a session fee that pays for our daily rate for being there, and that's a little more than you normally get because you only work 15 to 20 days a year on one of these big pictures that make billions of dollars. And so on the back end, when it gets released to the theater or you see it on TV, that's when we get something called residuals, which is we get a share of our pay, which comes later. And there were whole sections of streaming that we were either not getting paid enough or we weren't getting paid at all in the residual pool. And then the fourth thing was this AI issue about having people scanned and we're going to use it forever. We're never going to pay you again. The fifth thing, though, which I think was the most important, and we haven't talked a lot about it, I know the president and the executive director talked about it, was to break the pattern of bargaining. we had followed this pattern of bargaining for about 40 years, where they came in with the same things, we came in with the same asks, and nothing really ever changed. It just incrementally went along lagging. And that was the most important thing that changed, is we significantly changed the pattern of bargaining, that we're not going to settle for playing the same game the same way. And they walked out of negotiation. They had, I think the guys told us, out of all the time they spent, they might have spent 12 hours together in the room over 118 days.
Wow.
Where the negotiators are actually there. It was mostly our folks working together to try and take and then pass across. We pass across a response. The first response they gave was the day we called the strike, which they just essentially said, yeah, we're not doing any of this stuff. We're just going to give you what we gave you the first day. So yeah, it was entirely in their ballpark to say, we're going to have to change. We're going to have to make some deals here. And they didn't do that.
Yeah,
and the longer it went, I think I came on here and said mid-November. I've said all along November 15th was the date I had on my wall, and November 8th, I think, was the day. So I felt like pretty good about that. We made gains in every one of those areas. I think the most concerning thing that people had is this artificial intelligence piece. And it's mainly because it's this boogeyman that we don't understand. And it's the fear of its robots are going to take over, do everything. And every union is dealing with this. And for the first time, we actually have 18 pages of contract negotiation language that say, this is how we're going to control the use of artificial intelligence to replicate individuals. It is not the end. It is not perfect. And it is not everything we wanted. But it is the first time a union has ever put that kind of language that protects individual rights about having your face, your body, or your words, your voice replicated and used without your permission. So we have to have informed consent. We have to have compensation each time it gets used. So it means you want to take the scan, great. It's going to cost you $30,000, $40,000 to make, but you're going to still pay us every time. So you may as well just pay us every time.
Yeah, might as well have the actual person do it instead of the construct, because that's, I was saying all during the strike that this is really on this AI front, the front lines of the AI war, and what comes out of this is going to be kind of the starting point for everyone else down the road. So you're pleased with how this came out? Yes? No?
I mean, as a negotiator and as a strategist, knowing we have for the next 3 negotiation cycles, this is how I think. That we have set a baseline where we've actually gotten new concessions from the employer and new protections for the first time in several different areas, residuals and AI being, there's things about ethnic hair care, there's things about recognition of Martin Luther King Jr. and Juneteenth as holidays, days in our work schedule. Those were not there before. Those are now. So a bunch of other things in this contract that will kind of go below the radar, but are very, very important parts. And especially things we brought forward from our local. These were issues. Pretty much everything that we put on the table is in there. So I think I'm happy with where this negotiation got us and sets us up for the next one. Good. I'm also happy that we now can feed this protection into both labor law, and when we have complaints about violation of labor law, we can take it using the existing laws, and then also to lobby Congress. We already have, I don't know if you saw the No Fakes Act, which has not been introduced by the Senate yet. It's one of those things where they pass it all around. Let's formalize the language. When you got Chris Coons and Amy Klobuchar on the Democrat side, and Tom Tillis and Marsha Blackburn on the Republican side agreeing to something, you got something that's got everybody's attention.
Yeah. And
so I feel like that's the most important thing, is that we put a marker in the ground that said, everybody follow us. And we have another contract negotiation on the net code contract, which is your award shows and your talk shows. That's our performers work on. The writers do the same. That's next year. Teamsters and the Stagehands Union goes into contract next year. So we've set the bar for everyone to continue to follow us at a much higher level than has been done before. And that, from a strategic perspective, is great.
No, it's really good stuff. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show with Elliot Bales. Elliot's an actor and a member of the SAG-AFTRA union, also Actors Equity. He's a member of the SAG-AFTRA Washington Mid-Atlantic Local Board. Been my go-to guy on this strike almost from the beginning when we met in Washington, D.C., and I love having you on. Now, obviously, you've got this tentative agreement. Any chance the membership doesn't ratify it? I mean, it's always in the back. Any chance of that?
I am never going to say no because I said Donald Trump would never become president of the United States. So I'm not going to say no ever again on anything. And I'm a recovering conservative, so it's okay. That's not a political issue. That's an individual issue. But there's always a chance that it won't. I think there are enough of us who want to go back to work and believe that we should not. As an example, background performers who right now make $186 a day to go stand and be the crowds that you see in a scene. That's, they got to work a lot of days to make a living at that. Their pay increases 18% over the next 2.5 years. That's a pretty big win. And to abandon that because you don't like the AI language would be silly. And so, but I also think we're a union that listens to people finally. And so everybody's getting their voice, everybody's getting their say. And as we have conversations, most of the people who are naysayers are picking one issue. And we're constantly, those of us who, and I say up front, I'm voting yes on this contract. I've spent a few days with it now. That take the thing as a whole and take the next view to the next 3 contract that we're going to negotiate in a year and then 2 years and 2.5 years from now. And does this set us up for a stronger position going into that negotiation? The answer is yes.
Good.
So I think people will come around to seeing that. Generally, we can count about 50. I think it'll be about the same as our national board representation, which was 86% recommended approval. So if I've got to put a number on the table, I'd say it's probably going to be about that.
Good. Yeah, because it's one of those questions that keeps coming up. Is it worth it to go on strike? And I say, look, strikes have their value. Sometimes no one wants to do it, but it's the last arrow in the quiver, I believe. And sometimes you got to pull it out. So was it worth it? I guess that's the question to you.
I think this time it was. I would always be very reticent to do that. But when we were faced with the statements, especially for the Writers Guild going out before we were, and we were faced with this pattern of bargaining of let's pick off one union, then let's pick off the other, and then let's demand that the other union, that's what we faced. Well, we gave them this, that you should take that. Totally different contracts, totally different pay structure. It's like you're not even in the same ballpark, guys. So breaking that pattern, we knew was going into this was going to be the thing we had to do. We could not let that game get played anymore. And we'd watch it happen, especially for the last three cycles of negotiation. So this really needed to be a fundamental shift. And the time was right. When you have 88% of young people under the age of 30 who want to join a union, when does that happen? It's been forever. Then that's been a part of our national psyche. No. So the point's here. The time is here for the labor movement to say, you know what, we've gone too far the other way. And yeah, sometimes we demand too much, and we got to kind of come back to reality. That's kind of what's happening now in our conversation about where we could have gotten to this time. But there's a place where you draw the line and say, this next time will be this one. But this is a lot more than we had. No, and for that reason, I say this strike was worth it.
I mean, look, at the end of the day, you start negotiating with what you want, not with what you'll take. And you move your way back. That's any good negotiator, I'll tell you that. But Elliot, I appreciate you sharing some time and keep getting us up to date on this. Congratulations. I hope the ratification vote goes through, as you have said it. Hopefully it does. And I wish you the best, man. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Rick, and keep preaching the good news. See you soon.
Thanks so much, Elliot Bales. Make sure you check out his website, elliottbales.com. We'll get links out on social media. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Right back after this. Stick around.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1919. That was the day that federal agents stormed the offices of the industrial workers of the world in New York City. They were looking for evidence connecting the organization to radical communists or anarchists. The ransacked office was part of the infamous Palmer raids, when Attorney General Alexander Palmer responded to the growing Red Scare hysteria by raiding the offices of leftist organizations and arresting thousands. Hundreds of immigrants to the United States were deported during the raids without legal due process. The 1917 Russian Revolution had stoked fears about a spreading communist threat. Newspaper headlines helped to drum up public panic. A week before the IWW raid, a headline on the front page of the Evening World, published in New York City, declared, "Reds in U.S. plotted revolution, deportation for all radicals." The day after the IWW raid, a Washington Post headline read, "Law to crush Reds." Writing in 1920, Attorney General Palmer warned, quote, "The chief appeal communism makes is to the worker. If they can lure the wage earner to join their own gang of thieves, if they can show him that he will be rich if he steals, so far they have succeeded in betraying him to their own criminal course." Palmer went on to describe how communists had, quote, "stirred discontent, caused irritating strikes, and infected our social ideas with the disease of their own minds and their unclean morals." Palmer's references to workers and irritating strikes demonstrate that he perceived the labor movement as part of the communist threat. Anti-communist hysteria took its toll on the most radical elements of the U.S. labor movement, especially the IWW.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
So, Mr. Free Speech bought Twitter because he believes in free speech, and then went about charging everybody for the check mark to get you heard. But Mr. Free Speech, Elon Musk, he is a free speech absolutist. He believes in free speech, he says, except where it comes to him. He evidently now, thanks to the far-right Fifth Circuit Court, can deny Tesla workers the right to wear union apparel. No more. Again, this has been something that's been in law in this country since at least 1945. So this is long decided law. This has been long decided. Employers try and fight it and go through all this, but it's Musk who's now got a favorable decision to say, no, you workers who are going to try and organize, because the Tesla workers have already set up an organizing committee. No, you cannot wear a T-shirt that has that union on it. Yeah. This is where we're going. And look, with the Supreme Court that we have now, do you think that they're willing to overturn something that's been decided law since 1945? Oh, you bet. Oh, you bet. I'm sure they can dream up some stuff quite easily. And maybe, this whole idea, the Heritage Foundation actually put out a paper on ruling the NLRB itself unconstitutional, doing away with that. Because, we don't need unions anymore. That's something we needed when they were children working in the slaughterhouses. Oh, wait a second. That's happening now. Huh. Yeah. Some good news coming out of the Pennsylvania House of Representatives, and this is a good thing. Some union leaders today at the Capitol held a shindig talking about a piece of legislation that they are going to be moving on, and actually passed. It passed out of the House with 5 Republican votes. Yes, there were 5 Republicans that voted for it. House Bill 1481, which would allow workers who go on strike or are locked out to collect unemployment benefits. Now, as I understand the legislation, if you go out on strike, it would be a 30-day waiting period. So after 30 days on strike, you could then collect unemployment. If you're locked out, it would be immediate. You'd get unemployment because you didn't choose to go on strike. Now, New Jersey and New York already have this on their books. So this is just, Pennsylvania going, hey, we'd like to do that. And look, you had Adam Schiff, who's running for Senate out in California, who brought it to the U.S. House of Representatives. The Empowering Striking Workers Act of 2023, not going to pass in the House. A Republican House, a do-nothing Republican House. Doubt it even gets a vote. But this is one of those pieces of legislation that you put out there because, one, you hope it passes, because I think it would be really good for working people. But two, it is a messaging bill. Immediately, the crazy right-wing think tank in town went, as you would expect, full-on crazy. Taxpayers shouldn't be funding strikes. And you go, no, working people would be funding it. And this is where, they're saying that it would increase the number of strikes. It would make people want to go on strike. And no, nobody wants to go on strike. It shows how fundamentally they don't understand any of this. I believe if you were to pass this kind of legislation, you would have less strikes, because employers wouldn't try what union busting consultants tell them to do, which is what we saw with the Screen Actors and the Writers Guild. We're going to starve them out. We're going to make them lose their homes and go bankrupt. That's an employer tactic. We're going to make them hurt, and then they'll come back and we'll give them less. That's one of their negotiating tactics. So if you take that out of the equation and you say, look, after 30 days, if you're on strike, if you haven't figured this out and the employer hasn't negotiated, you know what, we're gonna help ease the pain. Maybe employers aren't going to be pushing that way. Maybe if it will go on longer, maybe they'll say, hey, let's just sit down and figure this out. But while the pendulum is so far to the side of employers, knowing that, look, most working people are 1-2 paychecks away from economic distress, maybe this little bit would change that dynamic a little bit. Now, understand, unemployment is not a living. The reality is it replaces in Pennsylvania, I think, just about 40% of your lost wages. I don't know anybody who can live on 40% of their wages for an extended period of time. So it better be a really good reason, like, being replaced by AI. So now, will it pass the Senate here in Pennsylvania? No. It's probably dead on arrival in the Senate, but it shouldn't be, because I did have a couple of conversations with people, just some quick thoughts with people. You go, hey, I know you're not in a union, but what do you think of this? And most people that I talked to didn't care. One, so what? Or said, well, I can see how that could be helpful. Now again, I come back to, nobody wants to go on strike. Nobody. But people do want to make sure that they get better wages, hours, conditions, that they get a fair share of the wealth that their labor creates. And I go back to this Zavlov, this Discovery Channel, Warner Brothers CEO. They were right. They were right all along. But they just chose not to listen, because they could. And maybe this would help. I want to hear your thoughts. Is it a good idea? Bad idea? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back.
Tuvalu is extremely vulnerable to the impact of climate change.
Australia signs historic climate refuge treaty with Pacific island nation Tuvalu. New analysis finds the last 12 months were the hottest in recorded human history. Some big policy changes after the 2023 elections. Plus,
I will not be running for re-election.
Manchin to exit the Senate.
Exit stage right. All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
On day one, I'm taking all the Biden regulations, the Green New Deal, ripping it up and throwing it in the trash can where it belongs.
Well, there's some good news from Ron DeSantis. Who knew Joe Biden passed the Green New Deal? This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, let's start, I think, with the least surprising news we will have all day on the Green News Report.
Yes, it's true. We have all just lived through the hottest 12-month period in recorded human history and likely the hottest in 125,000 years. That's according to a new analysis from nonprofit data firm Climate Central, which also found that 2023's historic extreme heat waves were made at least 3 times more likely by humanity's fossil fuel emissions that have warmed the planet dramatically. Plus, average temperatures over the past year have met or exceeded the 1.5 degrees Celsius warming threshold above pre-industrial levels that scientists warn could irreversibly damage, if not destroy, entire ecosystems.
Now, last time that came up, you said, oh, don't worry about it. It's only temporarily above 1.5. But are we quite sure it's only temporary?
Well, that's what the scientists say. And on top of that, a major new United Nations report finds that the top 20 oil-producing countries have plans on the books to increase output of oil, gas, and coal through 2030, despite warnings from the United Nations and the world scientists that fossil fuels must be urgently phased out. The UN Production Gap Report calculates that the collective emissions from projects planned around the world will blow past Paris Climate Agreement climate targets, quote, throwing humanity's future into question. The UN says the report shows that despite the rapid growth of renewable energy around the world and governments' pledges to cut emissions, most have yet to begin grappling with how they will begin to reduce demand for and production of fossil fuels that are the primary cause of the climate crisis.
Because you thought the fossil fuel industry was just going to, leave all that in the ground?
In politics, at the third Republican primary debate held last week in Miami, a coastal city already struggling against rising sea levels, the words climate change were never spoken by candidates or the NBC moderators. They also ignored the surge in U.S.-based manufacturing for electric vehicles and wind and solar energy incentivized by President Biden's climate law, the Inflation Reduction Act. The Republican candidates pledged to repeal clean air and water rules and expand fossil fuel production, and they misled the public about the fact that the United States today is producing and exporting more oil than during the Trump administration.
Oh, you mean they lied to the American public about Joe Biden's accomplishment? Knock me over with an oil-soaked feather.
Democratic Senator Joe Manchin of the coal state of West Virginia announced he will not seek re-election in 2024, putting Democrats at high risk of losing their razor-thin Senate majority that enabled passage of the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act.
And, of course, the Green New Deal.
Which did not pass.
Oh. Then why does Ron DeSantis want to tear it up?
West Virginia's current governor, Jim Justice, is favored to win the Republican nomination. Justice is a billionaire coal baron whose companies have racked up massive unpaid mine safety and pollution violations. In the 2023 election, voters in Texas approved $10 billion in new subsidies to expand electric grid capacity.
Nice.
But most of that will go to build new natural gas power plants.
Oh.
In Maine, voters rejected a proposal to replace their private investor-owned electric utilities with a publicly owned nonprofit, setting back efforts to push the utilities to transition to cleaner energy sources. Finally, Australia late last week signed a landmark climate climate and security treaty with the low-lying Pacific island nation of Tuvalu, offering a lifeline that will allow Tuvalu residents facing displacement from rising seas the right to resettle in Australia, a refuge as their Pacific homeland is lost beneath the seas. It's the first time Australia has offered residence or citizenship rights due to the threat posed by climate change. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese announced the agreement last week.
I believe that developed nations have a responsibility to provide assistance, and that is precisely what we are doing.
People of Tuvalu may end up being among the first to retreat due to climate change. I fear they will not be the last.
Nope.
For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So President Biden and Xi Jinping had their powwow today, and the president tweeted out, "I've just concluded a day of meetings with President Xi, and I believe they were some of the most constructive and productive discussions we've had. We've built on ground we've built on ground laid over the past several months of diplomacy between our countries and made important progress." And look, as we've been talking about for months now, China's becoming much more aggressive, much more muscular, attempting to do some things they haven't in a while. But eventually they were going to feel their oats a little bit, and they're going to try and take Taiwan at some point. And the question is how is this moment really? How important is this moment? And who would you rather have in this negotiations? Would you want someone like Trump, who it's all about the art of the deal? And if you remember the deal was we're going to give China basically what they want. We'll slap some tariffs on them, and they'll promise to buy some stuff from us. They never did buy the stuff. Biden, to his credit, kept the tariffs, but it didn't slow China's move, because China has done the same thing to every president. Basically tell you what you want to hear and then go about doing whatever it is they want to do. Now understand, China's in a rough spot right now because their economy is not doing great. They've got some real problems. I had someone the other day, and this is one of those things that they told me that China released the virus to destroy, it was this big conspiracy. And I said, well, I don't know about that, because China's the one who's been hit hardest by it. They're the ones whose economy is reeling. In fact, it was just reported, I think yesterday, that the fact that we're remanufacturing, we're bringing jobs back, and that we're actually looking at domestic consumption for domestic production. China's economy has slipped to, I think the number was like 64% of the size of the U.S. economy. Now remember, we were almost right there. In fact, China was about to overtake us. They were the manufacturer of the world. And now the U.S. economy is outpacing China's economy. And the question is, do we return to the neoliberal ideals of, open borders and let's just start dumping things? Because yesterday we talked with Scott Paul, the president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing, and I got a number of email responses from people, talking about Chinese EVs. And interestingly enough, the vast majority of people who emailed us were on the side of, no, we can't continue the kind of open border free trade that allows a country like China to dump things into this country and undercut U.S. labor and undercut undercut prices temporarily. Because again, what they've done masterfully over the years in a very mercantilist way is they've come in, they've undercut, or they've bought up all the competition, and now the prices are rising and the profits. And this is where you go, will we continue the momentum? Because it was my view, when Trump was talking about this. You go back to 2015, 2016. He took his office in 2017. I said at the beginning, if he did a couple of things, he'd be unbeatable in 2020. Had he invested in infrastructure like he said he was going to, he was talking like $3 trillion. Biden got 1.25, historic, but still not close to the 3 trillion and not close to the 4.8 trillion that we actually need. Had he done that, had he done the infrastructure, and had he taken on China and begun what he said he was going to do, and that's bring back those factories, make Lordstown, Ohio whole, make Ottumwa, Iowa whole, all the places that we went on our working class heroes tour, go into those places and bring manufacturing jobs back. Had he done that, he'd have been unbeatable. And interestingly enough, the guy who's doing those things is Joe Biden, and not getting any credit for it. This is the part that's really quite remarkable, that not getting the credit that he's earned by passing this legislation with very tight Democratic margins and very little, if any, help from Republicans. There was a little help on the bipartisan infrastructure bill, not a lot. Let's not get crazy. But the fact that our economy has been fairly resilient, the fact that everything the Fed is trying to do to kill it, and everything that the Republican Party is trying to do to kill it, still we've been moving in a positive direction. Imagine if everyone were on the same page. And I think, with China, I think that has to be part of this. So as the president's meeting with President Xi, this is where we maybe we stop. Maybe we stop the if he's for it, I've got to be against it kind of thinking. Maybe we don't. At least that's where my mind has been, because, for so long we've given in to China because, corporate America wanted to. And look, there's still some companies that are hanging on to the hopes that they're going to be able to maintain their massive profit margins off the backs of American workers and slave labor in China. I know they are. But this is where it comes back to us and our elected leaders and the people that we put into the halls of power to stop this kind of stuff. Again, back to that representative democracy stuff that we like to believe in. I don't know what's going to come out of this meeting. The hope is that Biden, does what needs to be done to keep us on the path that he's set us on. And I keep coming back to this is another one of those moments where I'm happy that he's there and not the other guy. But there's much more that we need to be doing. I don't think we're doing enough fast enough on reshoring manufacturing. I don't think we're doing enough fast enough to position ourselves for what is eventually coming. And look, the fact that Ukraine and Russia are still an issue. This directly relates, in my view, to China. Now, look, I'm not a foreign policy expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I do get that if you allow Putin to be emboldened and you allow him to steamroll over Ukraine, the message that is sent to China is like, well, the U.S. doesn't have any resolve. They're not going to stick by people. So, hey, Taiwan, here we come. And you go, well, why do we care about Taiwan? Well, to have almost a democracy like that close to Beijing, that close to China, that's a positive. And look, we still need their manufactured goods. We still need their chips for the short term until we start building more of our own capacity. Which, I got to tell you, I'm still amazed that the smart people who run this country thought it was a good idea to offshore that kind of technology. It really makes you wonder. I know the smart people, they know what to do. Screw over working people. So, but when I saw this, it's one of those things that made me think that, the president's in a position of strength. Our economy is doing better than China's is doing. China is dependent on the U.S. Market to dump its stuff because, like what I was saying, there are all these EVs. I guess there's like a couple million that they could just start shipping over here, and they would sell, for virtually nothing. Surprisingly, only got a handful of people who are saying, look, if there's this capacity, we should be able to take advantage of that, and to be cheaper prices, we get to this goal down the road faster. And I'm going, no, we wouldn't. What we would end up doing is we would end up killing our own growing EV market. We'd end up killing manufacturers here. And haven't we learned that lesson? Haven't we learned the lesson of going, no, let China, let the cheapest labor and the most lax environmental regulations, let them do it. I mean, stop and think about it. The whole reason partially the reason we're going to EVs is because it's better for the environment. Imagine having it done in the worst environmental conditions with slave labor. I kind of think it sends the wrong message. Just a little bit. Maybe it's just me. I'm not 100% sure, but it's just one of those things. Now I'm hopeful. Hoping something positive comes out of this. I don't think there will be. I think there'll be a lot of pomp and circumstances. There'll be photos. There'll be smiling faces. But ultimately, nothing's going to change until we're the change, and that means don't buy stuff from China, especially not Temu and the other direct from China apps. Just my thought. Want to hear yours? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I got a lot more to get to after this. If you miss any portion of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Wherever you find your favorite podcast, you'll grab ours. Right back, stick around.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I just got word from my friends over at Mack Truck that they have ratified their agreement. You may remember the union negotiated agreement. They had a tentative agreement early in October, and the membership said no, get back to the table, negotiate something better. Well, I believe from what I'm hearing, they got something better. And the membership has approved it, so that's a good thing for the workers at Mack. Good on them. And again, this goes to show what worker power brings us. And look, we've been seeing a lot of strikes that are going on. And look, as I've been saying for a long time, strikes work. Strikes work well, because look, we saw the New York City nurses went on strike. They got a nice bump in their contract. You got the obviously the Screen Actor Guild, the Writers Guild, the Screen Actors, the Writers Guild. They got decent contracts, dealt with their main issues. I mean, because look, what'd you have? Almost 12,000 writers on strike, some 150,000 actors on strike. That's pretty remarkable. The UPS threat of a strike brought historic gains in wages, hours, conditions. The UAW strike, 150,000 workers are in the process of ratifying their contract. Now there's some rumbling from what I've heard. I think it's at Ford where it might, who knows? We will see. Kaiser Permanente had a strike. It got an incredible, incredible contract out of that. Some 75,000 people on strike. You had the threat of the strike in Las Vegas by the hotel and restaurant workers that saw, incredible gains. The reality, strikes work. When working people stick together, strikes work. And this is where, that's the message. It's that simple. I think I read a statistic that said that, the strikes this year are like nearly 1,000% increase over the last 2 years. And this stuff's contagious, and corporate America's got to start worrying at some point, because, and I think it's the reason that UPS ultimately settled, because they didn't want to get into a strike scenario. But I'm hoping that employers start to realize that, look, they've had it good for a long time. They have. It's time to now share the wealth. It's time to now, because everybody I talk to, people who reach out to me and share their stories, and I appreciate folks sharing their intimate stories with us. It's all about, hey, 30 years ago I was making a better living. Was making more money 20, 30 years ago. Our benefits were better. Our health care was better. Our pensions were better. All of this stuff. And people are struggling, especially as the new technologies have popped on. All this gig work. And what's interesting to me is I find that people think, gig work is some new creation. That, this is some newfangled thing because it's technology. The apps, help you be an Uber driver or Lyft or deliver food or whatever. None of this stuff is new. This is how work has been, in horrible times for hundreds of years. I was explaining to someone, not too long ago that, the Teamsters started out as, representing independent contractors. They were all gig workers. They worked, on the horses, with the horses and the buggies. But they didn't work for an employer. They were their own bosses, but they leased the horses and they leased the buggies. And it's no different today than the trucks or the technology or any of that. It's the same stuff, only different. It's that saying, the more things change, the more they stay the same. For working people, it's exactly the same. Which is why we need to have labor law reform, which is why we need to have people in Congress, in the White House, in state houses across this country who care about workers' rights and care about ensuring that workers get a fair shake. Why you need to have unions who bring people together so that they can affect some change. And that's where these strikes work. And I'm hoping there's a point where we don't have to do this anymore. I'm hoping there's a point of just, the threat of, well, they might go on strike. That's bad for everybody. How about we don't? Because I don't know how much money the studios lost when the actors were on and the writers were on strike. I'm not sure how much that is. Somebody will probably send me the amount, and it'll be mind blowing. I go back to that strike. There was a strike. I think it was up in Buffalo. Or was it Massachusetts? It's a slip off the top of my head, but they were on strike for a couple of months. And the hospital spent like $10 million to fight the strike and starve the workers out when they could have spent $5 and given the workers everything they wanted. And this is where I keep coming back to, as a community, we have to support striking workers, which is why I keep talking about adopting a striker. When there's a strike near you, get out there on the picket line with them. Throw a couple of bucks into the strike fund. Bring some water or pizza, beer, whatever. But participate, because their advancement ultimately trickles to you. That is something that does trickle down. And I've told the story numerous times of, when I used to be on the negotiating committee, you'd have supervisors for the company go, hey, go in there and get as much as you can, because they knew that their raise was predicated on what we won at the bargaining table. Now, they weren't union members, but they benefited from us doing well. And why would you say that would happen? Well, because look, at the end of the day, you still need people on that side of the fence too. And if you're not paying them at least as well as the people that they're in charge of, there's tension there. And you get people jumping ship. And they can't have that. So I look at this and I've got hope that maybe with these big strikes and with the victories that have come out of it and the solidarity that's been shown, maybe we don't have to have them. Maybe both sides sit down and actually come to an agreement. Because that's the perfect place. When people negotiate in good faith, that's where you want to be. When the pendulum swings too far to either side, and look, I don't want labor to have all of the power either, because that's not good either. Right now, the pendulum is too far to the side of the employer class, and the workers have been taking it on the chin. It needs to come back somewhere near the middle. And these strikes, I believe, are part of what's going to bring that back. When you look at the facts that and we see these reports pop up every once in a while. 40% of the people can't afford a $400 emergency. It's like 65% of people can't afford a $1,000 emergency. And why is that? Why do so few people have money saved for retirement when most people have access to a 401k? Why is it that they don't have the ability to put money aside? Well, I'd argue a big part of that is they don't make the wages. What the right will tell you is, well, they just don't prioritize. No, you prioritize savings over your kids eating. Those are your two choices. Kids are going to eat. And I was talking about this with my producer today. And, we were talking about, because we're about the same age. And, talking about being, like an 18, 20-year-old now and trying to make it and start out like we did. And, it's easy to look at the younger generation. Oh, you got the world by the short hairs. And the reality is they don't. Saddled with massive debts, jobs that don't pay, no benefits, no future. And then we wonder why people don't want to work in those conditions. I go back to myself. When I started working, I started working for $3.35 an hour, as a kid, with my first job. And then you worked your way up until I got a union job that, paid really well, with health care, with retirement, with a defined benefit pension, which most people don't even think ever existed. It's kind of like one of the, no, that never happened. And you go, yeah, it does. And it's something we can and should be fighting for. But again, I go back to the power has swung so far out of the hands of we, the working people, into the hands of the people who sit in the corner offices, that we forget we have power. And what these strikes have shown and what they've proven time and again, strikes work. Solidarity works. When people come together and communities come together, good things can happen. When organized labor takes on organized money, organized labor wins. And I've said it a million times. They may have all the money, but we have outprocreated them. There are more of us. And if we stop allowing ourselves to be divided, if we stop allowing ourselves to be pitted against each other, we got a chance. We got a chance. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1919. That was the day that federal agents stormed the offices of the industrial workers of the world in New York City. They were looking for evidence connecting the organization to radical communists or anarchists. The ransacked office was part of the infamous Palmer raids, when Attorney General Alexander Palmer responded to the growing Red Scare hysteria by raiding the offices of leftist organizations and arresting thousands. Hundreds of immigrants to the United States were deported during the raids without legal due process. The 1917 Russian Revolution had stoked fears about a spreading communist threat. Newspaper headlines helped to drum up public panic. A week before the IWW raid, a headline on the front page of the Evening World, published in New York City, declared, "Reds in U.S. plotted revolution, deportation for all radicals." The day after the IWW raid, a Washington Post headline read, "Law to crush Reds." Writing in 1920, Attorney General Palmer warned, quote, "The chief appeal communism makes is to the worker. If they can lure the wage earner to join their own gang of thieves, if they can show him that he will be rich if he steals, so far they have succeeded in betraying him to their own criminal course." Palmer went on to describe how communists had, quote, "stirred discontent, caused irritating strikes, and infected our social ideas with the disease of their own minds and their unclean morals." Palmer's references to workers and irritating strikes demonstrate that he perceived the labor movement as part of the communist threat. Anti-communist hysteria took its toll on the most radical elements of the U.S. labor movement, especially the IWW.
For people who live in trailer parks, can anything be scarier than the sound of a roaring tornado? Yes, most frightening is seeing slick real estate gentrifiers prowling around. For some 20 million low-income Americans, being able to park a mobile home in a trailer park is their only affordable refuge from homelessness. But while they own their mobile homes, a landlord owns the land they're parked on. So here come high-finance hucksters backed by Wall Street rapaciously buying out local landlords, then casting out the powerless trailer owners so developers can build luxury condos for the rich on that land. It's an especially contemptible case of corporate greed stomping on human need. Indeed, these are among America's most vulnerable people being stripped of their homes. But what can they do? Ask the residents of Riverside Terrace Trailer Park, located near downtown San Antonio. Many had previously been evicted from a nearby mobile home facility that was converted into a high-dollar apartment complex owned by an out-of-state hedge fund. So they panicked when word spread that Riverside Terrace had been put up for sale by local owner Travis Cummings. But then came a New Hampshire-based advocacy group named ROC, Resident Owned Communities. It contacted Cummings and Riverside's low-income residents about forming a co-op. Then, the group provided expertise and arranged financing so Riverside's tenants could create, control, and collectively manage a co-op that is now the official owner of the 46-unit park. Valerie Valenzuela, who works evening shifts at a Home Depot and was elected to the new co-op's board, proudly notes that the residents, who mostly have incomes under $30,000 a year, are now not just tenants, but homeowners. This is Jim Hightower saying, today, some 1,000 mobile home communities are resident-owned. For information, go to rocusa.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, Joe Manchin says he'll do anything to help his country. And I guess it means that he's considering running for president because he believes that's going somehow someone is convinced. I don't know who would possibly be able to do that, but he thinks this is going to help the country. Yeah. Evidently, he thinks that there's a lot of moderates out there who are just looking for someone to throw their vote behind. Interesting times. Here to share some thoughts on, well, could we have a President Mansion? And isn't he an old guy too? But here's this answer some of those questions. Our good friend, former Ohio Congressman and political analyst, Bob Ney. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you, Rick.
So, what do you think? Joe Manchin running for president. What do you think?
Well, he'd be a spoiler. Now, he said in one of the articles, with the AP article, he said that Donald Trump would destroy the U.S. democracy if he won a second term. That's what he said. But I think if Manchin ran, he would not be helpful, to Biden. So if that's his real theory about Trump, then I don't know how him running would do that. Now if, and I read some polling where RFK had, I don't know, it was something like 20-some% of the vote. I'm not a little skeptical of that, obviously. But RFK or Manchin could be spoilers. RFK could hurt Trump, and Manchin, I think, could hurt, with some voters, could hurt Biden. So they're not going to win, but they could be potential spoilers in a very close race between Biden and Trump.
No, and you see this Dean Phillips guy from Minnesota, saying he'll spend any amount of money to do this, and his rationale was, he goes back to Carter and Teddy Kennedy running against Carter, saying, well, I know he's going to lose, so I'm giving people an alternative, and I'm going, I don't know if that's helpful.
Well, they're not alternatives as much as they're spoilers. Also, some of the polling on the spoilers, whether it's the congressman from Minnesota or Manchin or RFK Jr., some of those pollings are off because of the fact people will respond at this point in time. There's general frustration with Trump and Biden both by majority of Americans. Period. They might say something now, but when they get in the booth, they start to think, a lot of people start to think, well, I'm throwing my vote away. And as much as I don't want Trump or Biden, I've got to potentially vote for one of them. So that happens too. So some of the numbers are sort of a false high right now on a third option. Again, the vast majority of people in America, if asked Trump or Biden, they would say neither.
Right. But your only two options ultimately are going to be, A or B.
Or you vote for Kennedy or, Manchin if he would run. And again, that becomes a spoiler vote. Now, if you had, sort of the perfect candidate that would jump in there, third party, was well-financed, and, was a really, really good candidate, you might be talking something different this time in modern history, where somebody might be able to take 33% of the vote and won. Of course, the Electoral College would be one big nightmare, wouldn't it?
Now, what would you do in that case?
I don't. That's what I'm sitting here wondering about the Electoral College. How would you figure that one out?
Yeah, I mean that becomes one. Now, would it be, if I'm going, back to my high school civics class, you elect the electors to go and cast their vote, and they're not bound to vote for who. In most of the cases, I don't believe they're bound to vote for who they were elected for. So they could. Is it possible they could change and come up with? I don't know.
Well, you need a majority of the 270 votes to elect a president. And in a lot of, the states, they're not legally bound, to support, and some of them they are. I mean, it just depends. You can't even predict it because it's bizarre combination if there were actually three people in the race that were equally divided.
Yeah, but wouldn't you end up with whoever had the most electoral votes, though? I mean, you wouldn't have to get to 270 if three people, because 270 is the magic number to get you over the total number. But it would be over who had the most votes. Whoever took California and maybe a couple other states.
Right, because if you took 200, you need 270 to become president. You need a majority, of 270. So yes, if there's a strong three-way race, somebody would take X amount of votes, and you're now taking 270, and you've got to get to 91 technically or something. If you get three of them, if they were very, all three very equal.
Well, no, the 270 isn't that's one more than what is it, 430? They're 435, right?
Well, you need to win. Now I'm okay. You need a majority of 270 electoral votes is what you would need.
You need to get 270.
Yes, you need the majority. Yes, I'm saying it kind of wrong. The Electoral College would have 538 electors. So you need I'm saying it wrong. A majority of the 270 electoral votes is required. So yes, you've got to get to that because you have 538 electors.
But if you had three people running, you wouldn't need to get to 270 if the electors were split. You would just need a majority, right?
Correct, yes. You have 538. You've got to get to 270 to elect the president. So you would have to have a majority of 270 to win. If you've got three people...
that's in a two-way race, but in a three-way race, you wouldn't need to get to 270. You would just need the majority, right?
Correct, yes.
Which is not 270. I mean, it could be 200 for one, 200 for one, 138 for the other.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Right.
Yeah. So we could but would that be a good thing to have a president elected with a third of the vote, which means 2/3 of the people didn't want him?
Well, under our system, it's a tough question to answer. Is it a good thing? Probably not. But under our system, we also always tend to say, is it a good thing that somebody lost or lost the popular vote by X amount of millions but became the president because of Electoral College? So we're right back to that argument, too.
No, good
just
point.
In bigger numbers.
Yeah. How can you lose an election by 7 million votes and still win?
Exactly. And it's because we have an Electoral College, which goes back to the whole debate of the Electoral College, why it was created, because of small states, on and on and on, yeah. And then with three people, it intensifies that argument, I think. So, yes, to answer your question, it would be a tough sale because this time the majority of the country doesn't want, even through the Electoral College system, technically. So, yes, it would be tough.
Yeah, I mean, but a lot of weird things going on. A lot of weird things. I'm looking at the McCarthy dust up yesterday, and you've got Ken Buck, the Republican from Colorado, who has jumped in, siding with Tim Burchett, saying that Kevin McCarthy and lying are like peanut butter and jelly. And I'm going, kind of reminds me of Forrest Gump. Me and Jenna, we're together like peas and carrots. It's just one of those. Seriously, is this the best we've got? Is this the best we've got, Bob?
Well, also, here's another thing that kind of gets me about Burchett, congressman from Tennessee, who got, quote, elbowed in the kidney. Now, I read in the article it was outside room HC5. I am extremely familiar with HC5. Any member of Congress that served there is familiar with HC5 on a Republican side particular. You come out of the doors of HC5, there there's a set of small steps. It's a crowded area, and when you go out of there, you go out in a herd. It is very, very possible that, of course, it should be on camera somewhere, but it's very possible that McCarthy went out of there and went by him. Couple of things. If he got, the big kidney punch that Burchett thought he got, did he go down to the House physician's office? By the way, little open secret. I love to tell them on your show. There is a House physician's office. It's run by the Navy. The Admiral's the head of it, and members can go down there and get X-rays and see physicians, anytime they're in the Capitol. So did he go down because it was such a severe, McCarthy gave him such a severe kidney hit? Now, on top of all of this, the question I have is this. If he was hitting the kidney, all right, why is Matt Gaetz filing the ethics charge on McCarthy? Burchett has to have his guy, Gaetz has to file the charge. If you were, if you and I were Burchett and we got kidney punch, we'd have stopped, grabbed the back of the coat.
Yeah.
Of McCarthy and said, "Hey, buddy, come here for a second." That's what would have happened. But why would you not go to, if you were Burchett, to Gaetz and say, "Hey, I'm the one that got kidney punched. I'll file the ethics charge."
Yeah, I don't need you fighting my battles for me.
Right. What's this all about? Matt Gaetz wants to, because Matt Gaetz has got his own ethics charges, obviously. And I'm going to go back to Justin Trudeau. I watched the tape many, many times this week. Justin Trudeau did elbow a female member of Parliament of Canada. And I'm convinced Justin Trudeau had, and he's not on the top of my favorite list, by the way, but I'm convinced he did not know he elbowed her. I'm convinced. I watched the tape over and over and over. So, I wasn't there. Nobody's seen a camera thing on this, but it just doesn't add up when you start to have Matt Gaetz going to file the ethics charge for Burchett. Is Burchett incapable of actually doing that? Is he somebody that's incapable of filing an ethics charge?
Yeah.
It just doesn't add up, the whole thing. Drama. Drama.
It's just crazy where we are. Also, another Republican legislator from Louisiana, a guy named Clay Higgins, evidently he claimed during a House hearing that the FBI has something called ghost buses. Have you heard of ghost buses before? Because the FBI director said he didn't know what a ghost bus was.
I've seen the movie.
No, that's Ghostbusters.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant Ghostbusters.
No. Ghost buses. Well, they're secret purpose buses for nefarious stuff. Completely hush hush.
They're paranormal vehicles. Paranormal. That's kind of amazing that we think the FBI is so capable that they actually can have paranormal buses now.
Yeah.
Why do they say? Where do they come up with this?
See, this is the thing that I love when I talk to you, because I agree with you. There is so much that the right believes our government is capable of, and that we're just not that organized. No, the government is not capable of these sophisticated things. They just aren't. You can go back into the whole history of the intel agencies and go back in their history, and you see what huge mistakes they have made. I mean, they can't even call it correctly. So to think that they're capable of actually doing some of these things is absolutely amazing. It's the latest form of political entertainment. That's what it is. Yeah. I got to get your thought on immigration. Evidently, Greg Abbott is going to sign a bill allowing him in Texas to deport migrants. So we're gonna throw. I guess we're gonna have the papers please law back, where if you don't have your papers, they're gonna deport people from the country. Is that in the purview of a governor and state law?
Well, it's not going to be able to be held constitutional.
Are you sure?
The Texas House approved a bill which would make it a state misdemeanor, is what they're doing, to cross into Texas. So that would allow Texas law enforcement to arrest the undocumented immigrants, and then that law, what they're saying, would require the state judge to order the person to go to Mexico in lieu of prosecution. So they're saying you're going to be charged with a misdemeanor. You can go to Mexico. We won't charge you. But if the person doesn't go to Mexico, then they're charged with the misdemeanor. And so they'll go through a court process, but I don't think they can be deported. And I'll tell you why. And this is a case that baffled me. But in Ross County, Ohio, Chillicothe, Ohio, when I was a congressman for Ross County, I got a phone call from the union, and they said, hey, 20 illegals have crossed our picket line. And they said the sheriff's letting them go. I called the sheriff, and he said, unfortunately, I've arrested them. I called immigration. So I called immigration the next day, and I'm like, what are you doing? And the guy that answered, Bush administration, the guy's name was Gutierrez, and he said, yes, if they have not committed a felony crime, I'm saying let them go. So I went through that, I didn't like it, crossing the Union picket line, et cetera. But the local sheriff who arrested them couldn't hold the charge because the Fed said no. Now, sometimes the Fed says deport them. It's the mood of the Fed, of the executive. You know how it runs. That's why we need a comprehensive bill instead of presidents deciding 1 month this and the next month that.
No, you're right.
So I just don't see, I'm not a constitutional scholar, but the way they're, now it's very interesting how they crafted this law, though.
Yeah, I mean, it's all up to you. You can either go to jail or,
yes.
or
yes.
It's like in the old days when, because my uncle's generation, they're about, 15, 20 years older than me. He's like, you can either go to jail or join the military. This is kind of that. Right. Now, Mexico says it rejects the Texas proposal. So then now you've got another whole, complex piece of the puzzle. Now, if they can find other crimes of the person coming in, then they could make that, maybe go to a felony, which would be a different case. But the way this is running, you would say, no, I don't want to go back. So, okay, how long is the jail sentence? It's a misdemeanor. Okay, put me in for, 30 days, give me some meals, and I'll be on my way. 3 hots and a cot, yeah.
Yeah. So I just see this as more of a publicity piece for the governor than anything else, really. It's not enforceable federally.
We'll see what comes out of it. But, Bob, as always, I appreciate the thoughts. Good stuff as always.
Thank you.
Our good friend Bob Ney. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. We'll take a quick break. Right back to wrap things up. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1881. That was the day that trade unionists held the founding convention of the Federation of Trades and Labor Unions in Pittsburgh. This group later changed its name to the American Federation of Labor. During the 1880s, it grew to replace the Knights of Labor as the most powerful labor union organization in the United States. The Federation of Trades and Labor Unions, and later the American Federation of Labor, were dedicated to the principles of craft unionism. Unions were organized by crafts, so workers with different jobs at the same workplace would belong to different unions. The Federation of Trades and Labor Unions focused on gaining collective bargaining rights, and with it, better wages, benefits, and working conditions for its members. The creation of this federation marked a turning point in workers' struggles to improve their working conditions. However, not all workers or labor leaders were supportive of the idea of craft unionism. For example, Eugene V. Debs started the American Railway Union because he did not think the specific craft railway unions were an effective way to build worker solidarity in the industry. He wanted a union of all railroad workers, as opposed to unions divided by job description. Nevertheless, the Federation of Trades and Labor Unions and the American Federation of Labor showed that workers could band together. By doing so, they could fight for a better standard of living and a better future for themselves and their families. The Federation of Trades and Labor Unions proclaimed that their goal was to organize a systematic agitation to propagate trades unions' principles, to elevate trades unionism, and to obtain for the working classes that respect for their rights and that reward for their services to which they are justly entitled. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com. So, not so good news. Evidently, our trust in science as a country is falling. A new poll out by the Pew folks shows that 57% of Americans say science has had a mostly positive effect on society. That's down 8 percentage points from November of 2021 and 16 points down before the start of the pandemic. That's a problem. That's a problem when you have people who don't believe in science. And I actually met a flat earther, which I thought was just incredible because they truly believe the earth's flat. And I'm going, did we not figure? Never mind. Also, looks like Truth Social is in trouble. It's facing, quote, substantial doubt about the future. It's been burning through tens of millions of dollars in operating costs, according to a new filing. And I've been saying for a while, it's been propped up by by right-wing money, I think, just to give Trump a platform that everyone reports on. And I've been always saying, just ignore what he says. Nobody's on Truth Social. Nobody. Well, there are a couple of cranks and crazy people, but if you don't report on it, it's that whole thing about the bear in the woods. Look, nobody knows. It doesn't happen. And finally, I got a lot of responses to the Mark Wayne Mullen thing. And Mark Wayne was on Fox, and he said that he was nobly representing the good folks of Oklahoma with what he called Oklahoma values. When he challenged the Teamster president to a fight there, he said, quote, "What did people want me to do? If I didn't do that, people in Oklahoma would be pretty upset at me." I don't think so. I don't think people in Oklahoma would care about your petty little squabble. I think what they should care about are all the things that Sean O'Brien and Sean Fain and our friend Sarah Nelson, what they were talking about, how to make your constituents, how to make their lives better. I mean, that to me, kind of an important thing, not some petty 12-year-old clown show from a U.S. senator. I mean, this is the thing that gets me. This guy is a sitting U.S. senator. The Senate is supposed to be the upper chamber. I get it in the House. I get if you walk by somebody, you want to elbow them in the kidney. Okay, I get that. But the Senate is supposed to be where the adults are. Children are in the House, the rages of the people, all that stuff. But the Senate, you're supposed to be above that. I think Bernie Sanders, tried to get him to think like that, but no. He was representing Oklahoma values. Yeah. Now, here's the thing. If I were advising him, and the way things used to work, is you go about it like this, because O'Brien did put out a tweet, say, anytime tough guy or anytime cowboy, I think is what it was. If you're advising Mullen, and if I were, what I would have said is, look, you're a professional MMA fighter. This is so below you. You're a sitting U.S. Senator. This is so below you. Grow up. That should have been the line. But no. We've got to go to the child route, which again is another reason why a lot of the people who are representing us shouldn't be. And he's one of them. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.